The world has officially joined the cult of me. That's the new global religion. No gods, no saints, just endless shrines to ourselves. You don't need a church anymore. You've got a front-facing camera. You don't need confessions. You've got captions. Every day is a new sermon about how special, how unique, how different we all are, all while doing the exact same things as everyone else. The funny part is, we all know it's ridiculous, but we can't stop. The ego is not just an accessory anymore. It's a full-blown lifestyle choice. You can see it everywhere. People used to look in mirrors to fix their hair. Now they stare into them like they're decoding the meaning of life. They're not checking if they look good. They're checking if they look important. Because that's the addiction, not beauty, not vanity, but significance. Everybody wants to feel like they matter more than the next guy. It's not enough to exist. You've got to be noticed, applauded, adored. The ego isn't satisfied with being alive. It needs to be admired for. We've built an entire culture around me, a full-blown industry designed to feed our self-obsession. Every app, every ad, every trend whispers the same thing. You're the main character, and people eat that up. They walk around like they're starring in a movie no one else agreed to be in. You've got people talking to their phones in the middle of the street, narrating their own lives like they're a voiceover in a documentary about greatness. Here I am buying coffee, living my best life. No, you're not living your best life. You're holding up the line and pretending the foam on your lad is a personality. The ego's gotten clever too. It's not just loud and arrogant anymore. It's subtle. It's disguised as self-love, confidence, empowerment. Those sound good, right? Who's going to argue with that? But under all the glitter and affirmations, it's the same old narcotic. The ego learned how to market itself. It used to scream, I'm better than you. Now it whispers, I'm healing, I'm evolving, I'm in my power. Translation, I've just found a more spiritual way to be self-centered. And it's funny. The more obsessed people get with themselves, the more fragile they become. You'd think all this self-worship would make us stronger. But no, now everyone's one insult away from an emotional collapse. You can't even disagree with someone anymore without triggering a full existential crisis. The ego's like a balloon, shiny, impressive, floating around, but poke it once and boom, all that confidence disappears in a puff of air. That's the thing about egos, they look big because they're empty. The world didn't just build this monster. It rewards it. You get more likes for being louder, more attention for being angry, more followers for being fake. Humility doesn't trend. Kindness doesn't go viral. Nobody clicks on quiet self-awareness. The algorithm doesn't care if you're genuine and only cares if you perform. So everyone starts performing. They curate, filter, rehearse. Life becomes a production. The ego becomes the director, producer, and star all at once. You're not living anymore, you're broadcasting. And once the performance starts, you can't stop. Because if you stop, who are you without the audience? That's the real addiction. The ego feeds off eyes. It needs witnesses. You take away the spotlight and it panics. That's why silence makes people so uncomfortable now. Try sitting in a room with someone without a phone. It's unbearable. Nobody wants to just be. Being isn't enough anymore. There has to be proof that you were being. Documentation, validation, confirmation. Because if no one saw it, did it even happen? That's not philosophy. That's the modern condition. What's wild is how the ego's tricked us into thinking it's survival. You hear people say, you got to believe in yourself. Sure, that's nice. But somewhere along the line, believe in yourself became worship yourself. There's a difference between confidence and delusion. Confidence is quiet. It shows up, does the job, and doesn't need applause. Ego, on the other hand, needs a standing ovation for breathing. It's the voice that says, don't just do it. Make sure everyone knows you did it. It's not enough to help someone. You need a selfie doing it, preferably with a hashtag about how grateful you are for the opportunity to serve. The ego doesn't want good deeds. It wants credit. Even the way we talk about life now is ego-driven. My journey, my truth, my energy, everything's branded, personalized, trademarked. We can't just experience something, we have to own it. The ego treats existence like intellectual property, and you can't question it either. The moment you do, people act like you've committed blasphemy. Don't judge my truth. Your truth. There's no your truth. There's the truth, and then there's whatever story your ego came up with to avoid it. The ego loves stories. It builds identities out of them. I'm a victim. I'm a survivor. I'm an empath. I'm a visionary. Everyone's got a label, a role, a narrative that makes them feel like they're special. And once the ego finds a story that gives it importance, it'll defend it like a religion. You challenge that story, and you're not just disagreeing, you're threatening their entire existence. That's why people fight online like their lives depend on it, because to their ego it does. You see this everywhere. Politics, religion, activism, even kindness. Everything turns into an ego contest. Who's more woke? Who's more aware? Who's more oppressed? Who's more compassionate? It's all a scoreboard now. People compete over morality like it's a sport. You can't just do good anymore. You have to be seen doing it. You can't just care. You have to broadcast you're carrying with a caption, a filter, and a logo in the corner. The ego found a way to turn even empathy into self-promotion. The funniest part is everyone thinks it's everyone else with the ego problem. Nobody ever says, I'm the narcissist. No, it's always them. The influencers, the politicians, the celebrities, they've got big egos, but not me. I'm just being authentic. That's how the ego survives denial. It wears masks and points fingers. It thrives in the illusion that it doesn't exist. The louder someone insists they're humble, the more you can be sure their ego's running the show. You can't destroy the ego, though. That's the joke. It's not going anywhere. You can't meditate it away or pray it away. The moment you say, I've conquered my ego, guess who's talking? That's right. The ego itself, bragging about how enlightened it is. You can't win against it. You can only stop feeding it, stop believing every story it tells, stop needing to be right, to be seen, to be special, because the ego can't stand being ordinary. It'll do anything to avoid blending in, but the truth is we're all just another speck in the crowd pretending not to be. Look around. The whole species is trying to outshine itself. Everyone wants to be remembered, to leave a legacy, to make an impact. But for what? So some strangers in the future will clap for you. The ego's obsessed with immortality. It wants to live forever in someone's memory. It can't handle the idea that someday nobody will care, but that's the truth. Everyone's forgotten eventually. Every icon, every trailblazer, gone. Dust and pixels. And the ego hates that more than anything because it means it never mattered in the first place. The ego is the reason people chase fame like it's oxygen. They think being known will make them real. But fame isn't validation, it's magnification. It makes you more of what you already are. If you're empty, it just makes the emptiness louder, and the world keeps selling it like it's salvation. Be somebody, they say, as if being somebody means anything. You're already somebody, you're just not who your ego wants you to be. And that's the real problem. The ego doesn't want to exist. It wants to matter. And those are two very different things. We've become addicted to our own reflections, not in the mirror, but in the eyes of others. Every like, every comment, every follower, it's all a hit of validation, a small dose of I exist. That's the high, that's the drug. And like all addictions, it wears off fast. You post something, feel great for 10 minutes, then you need another hit, more likes, more followers, more attention. The ego's a junkie and the dealer's in your pocket. And it's not just online, it's in our jobs, our relationships, our conversations. Every interaction's an opportunity to perform. Even when people talk about vulnerability now, it's rehearsed. Let me tell you about my struggles. They say with perfect lighting and emotional music, the ego's smart. It figured out how to monetize authenticity. Nothing's real anymore because everything's content. But deep down, the ego's terrified. It's built on fear, the fear of being nothing. That's why it screams so loud. It knows it's temporary. It knows that when the noise stops, so does it. And that's the quiet truth underneath all this madness. We're all scared of disappearing. That's what the ego's trying to protect us from, the truth that we're not as important as we want to be. The irony is the moment you stop trying to be important, life actually feels lighter. You laugh more. You stop performing. You stop needing to be enough. The addiction starts to fade when you realize you never needed the drug in the first place. The ego is just a trick, a survival instinct that overstayed its welcome. The world doesn't need more people standing out. It needs more people just being, not selling themselves, not branding their souls, not chasing applause, just being. That's the only real rebellion left, to exist without needing an audience. Because when you stop needing to be seen, you finally start to see. That's when you're free. The ego used to be a quiet little thing. It used to live in your head, whisper in your ear, maybe make you show off at a party once in a while. But now the ego has Wi-Fi. It's got a platform, a password, a profile picture, and an audience that never goes away. It's gone from whispering to broadcasting. It's not enough anymore to think you're special. You've got to prove it, and you've got to make sure the world signs off on it. The ego went digital, and it found its favorite drug, validation. We live in a marketplace of self, and business is booming. Everyone's selling a version of themselves, neatly packaged, beautifully filtered, always on brand. You don't need to sell a product anymore. You are the product. The ego learned how to monetize. It figured out that attention equals currency, and everyone's chasing their next fix. Every scroll is an auction for your identity, every like a microtransaction for your soul. You've got people turning their lives into billboards. Their kids are content, their meals are marketing, their happiness is a brand strategy. The ego's become an entrepreneur, and the body is just a storefront. You can see it in how people talk too. Nobody says I am anymore. They say I brand, I'm building my platform, I'm growing my following, I'm creating engagement. The ego found its dream job, full-time influencer. And it doesn't even need to tell the truth anymore. It just needs to look good doing it. That's the trick. The ego doesn't care about reality. It cares about optics. It's not interested in who you are. It's obsessed with who you appear to be. And the world rewards that illusion. You can fake humility, fake intelligence, fake compassion, and people will throw digital confetti at you for it. Authenticity's been replaced by good lighting. People don't want depth, they want angles. They don't crave meaning, they crave metrics. You used to have to earn respect. Now you just need reach. You don't need to be right, you just need to sound confident in a 15-second clip. The world's full of experts now. Life coaches, spiritual healers, thought leaders, all built from the same material. Ego with a Wi-Fi connection. It's all a marketplace of attention and the price keeps going up. But the thing about this validation economy is it's never enough. You can't fill an ego, you can only stretch it. And every stretch makes it thinner. You see it in the desperation online. The constant posting, the constant proving, the constant performing. The ego's not happy, it's hungry. It's always starving for more. And every like, every comment, every follower, it's just another crumb that never satisfies. You can feed the ego a feast and it'll still wake up in the middle of the night, rummaging through the fridge of public approval looking for something to chew on. People don't talk anymore, they broadcast. Nobody's listening, they're waiting for their turn to speak. Every conversation's a competition. The ego doesn't care about connection, it's trying to win. It's trying to come out smarter, funnier, deeper, more enlightened than whoever's next to it. And the beauty of this era is the ego finally has a scoreboard. Followers, views, likes, shares, it's all numbers. Quantified self-importance. The ego doesn't have to feel good anymore. It can measure it. You can see how sick it's gotten when people start treating their lives like campaigns. They don't live moments, they curate them. They don't experience joy, they document it. Wait, don't eat that yet. I need a picture. Don't cry yet, let me get the lighting. Everything's staged, everything's marketable. Even grief has a hashtag now. The ego doesn't stop for death. It just pauses to check how the post is performing. And the scariest part is the line between the real person and the persona is gone. The ego's wearing the skin now. It's taken over. You ask someone who they are, and they give you their bio. They don't even realize they're advertising themselves to you. People talk like commercials now. Every statement has a hook. Every opinion sounds like it's been workshopped. The ego doesn't speak human anymore, it speaks algorithm. We've turned validation into a survival mechanism. People say things like, if nobody likes my post, I feel invisible. Invisible! You're a breathing, thinking human being, and you think you don't exist because no one double tapped a picture of your lunch. That's not connection, that's dependency, that's addiction. And the dealer's not some shady figure in an alley, it's a glowing rectangle that fits in your pocket. The ego checks it 50 times a day, praying for its next little hit of approval. The real tragedy is that this addiction looks like confidence. People confuse being loud with being sure of themselves. They think being seen means being secure. But the more you need to prove your worth, the less of it you actually have. Real confidence doesn't need confirmation. It doesn't care who's watching. But the ego, it needs an audience to survive. It dies in silence. That's why people can't stand quiet moments anymore. The ego can't talk to itself without getting scared. And so we keep feeding it every selfie, every opinion, every outrage. It's all fuel for the machine. The ego doesn't care what kind of attention it gets as long as it gets some. That's why outrage sells. That's why arguments trend. The ego would rather be hated than ignored. It doesn't want peace, it wants noise. It wants conflict, reaction, drama. Because the moment it's not the center of attention, it starts to panic. Do they still see me? Do I still matter? It's the same fear that's been there since the beginning, just louder now, amplified, digitized, monetized, and all of it runs on insecurity. The entire economy of ego is powered by self-doubt. If people ever actually felt enough, the whole system would collapse overnight. You wouldn't need to buy the clothes, post the pictures, prove your worth, or announce your achievements. You'd just be. But that's not profitable. You can't sell contentment. You can't monetize enough. The ego's like a business that thrives on dissatisfaction. It keeps you buying, scrawling, striving. The funniest part is that we all know it's a scam, but we keep playing. We laugh about it. We roll our eyes at influencers, but we still check the numbers. We still compare. We still care. That's the thing about the ego. It's a master manipulator. It doesn't make you miserable all at once. It keeps you slightly unfulfilled, just enough to keep you chasing. You're not happy, but you're most there. That's the trap. The promise that the next milestone will fix everything. The next post, the next promotion, the next purchase. But the finish line always moves. You ever notice how people say, I need to work on myself now? That sounds noble, doesn't it? But what they usually mean is, I need to become a better version of me that everyone else will admire. Even self-improvement's been hijacked by ego. It's not about inner peace, it's about better packaging. You don't want to evolve, you want to upgrade. The ego doesn't want transformation, it wants attention. The self-help world's the best example. Love yourself, they say. Put yourself first. Sure, fine. But love is an obsession. And putting yourself first has turned into forget everyone else. The ego took something beautiful and turned it into another form of vanity. People walk around quoting affirmations like mantras. I am enough. I am powerful. I am divine. And yeah, that's nice. But if you have to keep reminding yourself every day that you're divine, maybe you don't believe it yet. The ego's so fragile that it needs constant pep talks just to stay upright. And when the ego can't get validation, it turns bitter. That's when the jealousy kicks in. You start resenting other people's success because you see it as a reflection of your failure. You can't celebrate anyone else because your ego feels attacked by their achievements. You start comparing everything: looks, money, followers, happiness. It's exhausting. The ego turns life into a scoreboard where nobody actually wins. Even kindness isn't safe anymore. You ever notice how people brag about being humble? That's a hell of a contradiction. I'm just so grateful, you guys. Look at me being grateful. Humility used to be quiet. Now it's performative. The ego found a way to make modesty fashionable. We've got influencers crying on camera about being real. That's not vulnerability, that's marketing. The ego knows that pretending to be authentic sells better than being honest. And that's the saddest part. Everything's a performance now. Even sincerity's been commodified. You can't tell who's genuine anymore because everyone's playing a role. The ego doesn't care about truth, it cares about perception. As long as people believe it, it becomes real. That's why misinformation spreads so easily, because the ego doesn't want facts, it wants feelings. It wants to be right, not informed. It wants to win the argument, not understand the issue. The egos turn conversation into combat. Every discussion's a chance to prove superiority. Nobody's curious anymore, they're just waiting for their turn to be clever. The ego's terrified of not knowing something, of being wrong, of appearing small. But real growth only happens when you're humble enough to listen, to be wrong, to learn. The ego can't handle that. It would rather fake wisdom than admit ignorance. And that's the thing about this addiction. It's collective. It's not one person's problem. It's the whole culture. Everyone's feeding everyone else's ego, trading dopamine hits like currency. You validate me, I'll validate you. You like my post, I'll like yours. It's a mutual illusion. A shared hallucination that we all agree to keep alive, because the alternative, silence, humility, obscurity, feels unbearable. But maybe that's exactly what we need. Maybe the cure isn't more noise, but less. Maybe the way out isn't another post, another quote, another performance, but shutting up long enough to realize none of it matters. Maybe success, fame, beauty, validation, maybe all of it is just the ego's way of keeping you distracted from how temporary you really are. Because deep down, that's what it's all covering up, the fear of vanishing. The terror that when the show ends and the lights go out, there's nothing left to applaud. But here's the thing, maybe that's okay. Maybe we're not supposed to be remembered forever. Maybe we're just supposed to be here fully, quietly, honestly. No performance, no metrics, no mirrors. Just a human being in a world full of other human beings trying to see each other without needing to be seen in return. That's not the ego's version of success, but it might be the only kind that's real. Humility used to mean something. It used to mean you could be great without needing to shout about it. It meant you could do something kind, something real, and not need a parade afterward. But those days are gone. The world doesn't respect quiet anymore. You try to be humble now, and people look at you like you're hiding something. They think, if you're not talking about how great you are, maybe you're not that great. That's the problem. Nobody can shut up long enough to just be. Everyone's got something to say, something to prove, something to project. The ego used to whisper. Now it's got a megaphone, and it's not just loud. It's proud of being loud. You can't have a real conversation anymore because everyone's rehearsing their next line. You can see it in their eyes. They're not listening. They're waiting for their turn to talk. They're waiting to drop their big quote, their clever thought, their deep insight they saw on a podcast. Nobody's learning from anyone. They're just performing intelligence in front of each other. That's what passes for connection now. People trading monologues. Everyone's talking, but nobody's hearing a damn thing. And the funniest part, everyone thinks they're the reasonable one. Everyone's convinced they're the enlightened one surrounded by idiots. You ever notice that? Nobody ever says, maybe I'm part of the problem. Nope, it's always the others, the stupid ones, the brainwashed ones, the closed-minded ones. It's never us. The ego can't handle that kind of reflection. It's allergic to responsibility. It would rather rewrite reality than admit fault. That's why humility's dead, because humility requires honesty, and honesty doesn't get clicks. You can't sell quiet introspection. You can't brand uncertainty. The ego hates gray areas. It needs to be right. It needs to be certain. It needs to win. And when you combine that with a culture that rewards noise, you end up with billions of people shouting over each other, desperate to be heard, but saying absolutely nothing new. You see it online all the time. Everyone's an expert. Everyone's a philosopher, a healer, a visionary. But it's all ego dressed up in different costumes. People don't want to share wisdom. They want to be worshipped for it. They post about self-awareness while showing none of it. They talk about being grounded while floating miles above the ground in their own self-importance. It's a global talent show where the only talent is self-promotion. Humility used to be about perspective, knowing you're not the center of the universe. But now the universe has been redesigned to orbit around us. Every device, every algorithm, every app says, "You first. You matter. You're special." So of course everyone believes it. They live in echo chambers where every thought they have bounces back at them as truth. The ego loves that. It builds little castles out of agreement. And once it's comfortable in there, it never leaves. That's why people can't handle disagreement anymore. They act like being challenged is an act of violence. You don't agree with me. You must hate me. No, maybe I just think you're wrong. But the ego can't separate those things. To the ego, disagreement isn't just a difference in opinion. It's an attack on existence. It's amazing how fragile the confident ones really are. They'll lecture you about strength and self-love, then fall apart because someone didn't like their take on a movie. The world has turned humility into a weakness. People mistake arrogance for confidence, silence for stupidity, calm for indifference. The ego's rewritten the dictionary. Now, to be taken seriously, you've got to be loud, assertive, relentless. You've got to interrupt, dominate, assert dominance in every room. The moment you pause, the moment you listen, they think you've lost. Nobody realizes that sometimes the strongest person in the room is the one who doesn't need to speak at all. The ego can't stand quiet power because quiet power isn't performative. It's not selling anything. It's not asking for applause. But we live in a world that confuses performance with presence. You can have 1 million people hanging on your every word and still not say a damn thing of substance. And yet someone sitting alone, minding their business, not posting about their every thought, that's the person who's actually free. Freedom, that's the real word here. Because humility isn't submission, it's freedom. It's freedom from needing to be right, freedom from needing to be admired, freedom from needing to win. The ego's like a full-time job, always checking, always comparing, always worrying. Do they like me? Do they respect me? Am I important enough? Humility walks off that job and doesn't even bother to clock out. It says, I don't need your approval to exist. That's power. That's peace. But people are terrified of that peace. They can't sit with it. You ever try to just sit in silence with someone? It drives them crazy. They start fidgeting, grabbing their phone, talking about nothing just to fill the air. Silence exposes people. It's a mirror without filters. The ego doesn't like what it sees there. It likes the edited version, the one with good lighting and clever captions. And you know, humility is not about thinking less of yourself. That's another lie the ego tells. It's about thinking of yourself less often. There's a difference. The ego loves to play both sides. When it's full, it says, I'm the best. When it's starving, it says, I'm worthless. But either way, it's still obsessed with me. That's what people don't realize. Self-hate and arrogance are twins. Both of them keep the spotlight in the same place. Humility moves the spotlight away entirely. The ego loves to play dress up too. It pretends to be humble. I'm so honored, so blessed, so grateful. Yeah, you're also announcing it to millions of people. There's nothing wrong with gratitude. But when you have to tell everyone how thankful you are, you're not being humble, you're managing your image. The ego figured out how to fake humility better than most people can feel it. And it's contagious. People see fake humility rewarded and they copy it. Before you know it, everyone's playing the same game, perform goodness, avoid accountability, and call it authenticity. The ego's evolved. It's not just about bragging anymore. It's about being relatable, being real. That's the new trick. Now arrogance wears sweatpants and calls itself grounded. But underneath all the posturing, all the noise, all the pretending, everyone's exhausted because keeping up an ego is heavy work. It takes energy to be fake. You've got to remember your stories, maintain your mask, keep feeding that endless hunger for validation. That's why people burn out. That's why they snap. That's why they break down in bathrooms after pretending to have their life together all day. The ego's a parasite. It feeds on your peace, and it'll eat until there's nothing left but anxiety and noise. You can tell who's lost an ego by how defensive they get. Say something simple like, hey, maybe you're wrong about that, and watch their eyes catch fire, because the ego doesn't separate I'm wrong from I'm worthless. It's the same thing to it. That's how it traps you, by convincing you that being fallible makes you nothing. Humility knows better. Humility knows being wrong is part of being human, but the ego would rather die than be ordinary. That's the tragedy of this whole thing. Everyone's trying so hard to be extraordinary that they've forgotten how beautiful it is to be ordinary. The ego says you're special, you're chosen, you're destined. And yeah, sure, that sounds nice, but it also separates you. It builds walls between people, because if you're special, that means others aren't. The ego needs hierarchy to survive. It needs someone to look down on. But humility doesn't care about hierarchy. It sees everyone as equal because it's not measuring anymore. You can see it in how people treat each other now. Conversations used to be about understanding, now they're competitions. You can't even share good news without someone turning it into a comparison. Oh, you got a promotion. That's great. I just started my own company. You ran a 5K. Nice. I'm training for a marathon. Nobody celebrates anyone anymore. They just use your success as a mirror for their own insecurity. That's the ego at work, turning everything into a contest that nobody asked for. Humility is the antidote to all that, but it doesn't come easy. You have to let go of control of image, of the constant need to manage perception. You have to be willing to not be impressive. That's hard in a world where even kindness is commodified. You smile at someone, and before you know it, someone's filming it for content. Man, help stranger, wholesome moment. We can't even be decent without needing a headline about it. You want to see the ego in its purest form. Watch how people handle not being noticed. That's when it panics. When you do something good and nobody claps. When you share an opinion and nobody reacts. That's when the ego starts whispering, you don't matter. That's the voice people are running from. That's why they can't stop posting, performing, proving. The ego can't survive without noise, but humility can. Humility doesn't need noise. It can live in the quiet. And maybe that's the real rebellion now, being quiet in a world that can't shut up. Not because you've got nothing to say, because you've got nothing to prove. Imagine that. Not needing to win. Not needing to be admired, just being. The ego would call that defeat, but it's actually the greatest victory there is. Because when you stop needing to be special, you finally get to be real. The ego's the mask. Humility is what's underneath, and underneath it all, we're all the same, fragile, temporary, trying to make sense of things. The ego hates that truth because it can't profit from it, but humility embraces it. It doesn't fight to be remembered, it's content to be. That's the difference between the noise and the peace. And maybe if we ever learn to shut up long enough to listen, not to respond, not to impress, but to actually listen, we might find that the world makes a lot more sense without all of us shouting over it.